Inside the halls of San Diego State University lies a program dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast that takes you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. Our goal is to show the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alums on a pathway to journalism success. And now, here's your host, Josh Sushan.
This week on the Where You At podcast, we are going to learn a lot of things about possible jobs that you can have if you major in journalism or communications. And hopefully we can maybe break some news about what's going on with San Diego State's development of the Mission Valley area. Our guest today is Gina Jacobs, and my goodness, she had a very fascinating career. She attended San Diego State. She initially worked for a television station doing producing. She came back to her alma mater to work in media relations. She's worked in communications for San Diego Gas and Electric. She worked in politics, and now she is back at San Diego State. Her current job is the Associate Vice President for the SDSU Mission Valley Development. She has a leading role in shaping and executing the university's strategy to develop the Mission Valley site. It is a pleasure, Gina. Welcome to the Where You At podcast.
Hi, nice to see you, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's right away, I want to kind of get into the Mission Valley project because for those of us like me who don't live in San Diego, or maybe those who just haven't been to Mission Valley recently, give us the update. What are the newest things that are now happening? We know there's a football stadium. What else is happening and what's on the horizon next?
Yeah. So, obviously we had a great grand opening with the stadium, and this is now actually our third season of playing football in the stadium. And it has been a fantastic site for our football team to call home. Since the stadium opened, we've finished now all of the site improvements in terms of the roads and road network, the initial road network, the initial utilities for the site. And then we just did this year grand opening for the river park. So what part of our plans was to deliver the 34 acres along the southern border of the site as a river park. So there's active recreation, there's children's playgrounds, there's ping pong, there's cornhole. We even have something called a soccer pong table in there. And then just lots of activities for folks to use. So it's a great addition for the community, but it's also great for before the game. So athletics is activating that now for pre-game activities. And it's really a wonderful addition to the site.
What is coming up next and how many more total years is this going to take to develop the site into everything that was envisioned?
Yeah. So the long-term sort of development of the site is going to take place over the next decade plus. Right. It's all dependent on public-private partnerships for the most part. So that means we rely on the private market to, do a lot of the things that typically on a university campus, university would, fund and construct and own the assets. In this case, it's public-private partnerships. So we're seeking out development partners to do the work of building the rest of the site out. And that's primarily the role that I have now, is helping to generate interest in the development of the site and getting, developers in queue to start building things. But the next few projects that are going to be coming out of the ground are a market rate housing project. It's an apartment building, 620 plus units, and it will have ground floor retail, including a grocery store, restaurants, and other activities on the ground floor. So that's one of the first ones that will be coming out of the ground. We're also doing a affordable housing project as well. One of the things we committed to as part of our purchase agreement with the city was to deliver 10% of the affordable housing, 10% of the housing units on site would be affordable housing units. So we're doing that straight away with the first affordable housing project. And then the development of the Innovation District, which is basically the future SDSU campus of SDSU Mission Valley. The Innovation District is really a unique opportunity for the university to expand its research profile and co-locate with public and private parties and, really engaging sort of research and development environment. And so we have an initial project that we're working on for that as well.
Well, this is all really exciting. It's also fascinating. And I want to use this as a good time to kind of move back because I'm curious what 18-year-old Gina Jacobs would have thought if she was told that this is what you are going to be doing a couple of decades from now, in terms of like why you picked San Diego State and what you thought you were going to be doing with your life when you were 18 years old.
Yeah, this is not at all was not on the bingo card. I started, obviously, I was a journalism major from day one. So I was very into theater and acting, and that was kind of the direction I was going to pursue. I was a drama minor. And I thought, oh, journalism, like if I don't succeed at acting, I can just fall back and be a news person. Like that was part two. Like I did not have a clue what I was thinking, right? So I loved the journalism program at SDSU, and it was at a time when we got to expose to all the different types of, it wasn't just broadcast, it was all the different mediums. And there really wasn't social media, so we weren't talking about any of that at the time. And I just, really fell in love with writing and had a passion for that, and ended up finishing out, I did my 4 years, for a little over 4 years, 4.5, and went straight into journalism at NBC.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting when people discuss this is what I thought I was going to do. And then as the plan shifts, what are the different things that created why the plan shifted, and basically what you learned about the different roles and what you liked and what you were good at, and why things start to shift and where you go from there?
When I was working at NBC, I was doing mostly programming and promotion. So ended up being promotion producer. So putting together sort of those teaser packages and teaser spots that would help promote what was coming up on the newscast, different segments, special segments that would be part of those newscasts and promote them. And so it was really almost like an advertising PR type of a position within the context of a TV station. So it was really an interesting way to get exposed to those other aspects of writing. After some time, I realized I didn't want to move into the newsroom, right? I was sort of on the outskirts of the newsroom, but I was like, I didn't think that the newsroom itself was going to be quite a good fit for me. I loved San Diego. I knew if I wanted to commit to being in the newsroom, I was going to have to leave San Diego, and I didn't really want to do that. So I ended up pursuing a position in media relations back at SDSU. I'd always stayed connected to SDSU. I worked on campus as a student in the alumni office, so I had a lot of opportunities to engage with SDSU alumni and learn all the different things that they were doing. In fact, that's how I got my first position at NBC, was with Phyllis Schwartz, who's an alum of SDSU and was at the time the president of the local station. And she was a mentor to me through college and helped me find that opportunity. So I ended up, taking everything I learned at NBC and bringing it to SDSU. And being in the near the newsroom, in the newsroom, is the best way to learn how to be a media relations person, right? How to interact with the media, what they would be interested in, how to pitch, how to, get them interested in the stories that are happening on campus, and how to have a conversation with a media person. When you're in an institution, it's overwhelming, right? To have to interact with the media in some ways. So you don't want to say the wrong thing and all that kind of stuff. So that experience helped prepare me for the media relations role, because I wasn't, afraid. I knew how to interact and I knew what they would be interested in. So that definitely helped me. And I just grew in that role. That's where I met our friend Greg Block, and he became the director, and we got to explore all sorts of new media and social media as they were becoming a thing in that experience. So that started to shift my perspective towards, higher education, and really wanting to do more within the context of the university, and being strategic and thinking through like how to best position the university for the future.
You spoke about how when you were a college student, there really wasn't a whole lot of social media, or it was at the very infancy stages. And then as you come back working at San Diego State, that's when social media definitely is starting to become a bigger factor in our lives. And I'm curious if you can speak, especially reflecting back on it now, just how fast things were changing at the time, and how you and Greg and the other people at the university thought about, these are the different ways that we can tell the story of the university. This is how we can make the university grow. Because I feel like the time that you were there is the time when the university's profile really started to skyrocket.
Yeah, we just got curious and we like to explore things. So we knew, okay, YouTube, like what, the videos online. I had the news background and video experience. I was like, hey, let's try to do some more video. So we would started doing more video segments. We actually put together like an actual TV program where we took different segments, packages, and looped them together and found a host and put a show together that we then aired both on, had on the YouTube channel and then aired on KPBS. We started to blog. So we just got creative and got to explore and find different pathways to tell different stories and see which medium carried that story kind of further and help tell that story better. In some cases, it was the blog that was like easier for us to kind of express the mission of what we were trying to accomplish. And in other ways, it was creating video. And then obviously over time, long form video became shorter form video, became tiny little videos, right? And we would do little interviews with, professors to ask them their expertise on something. We would use that to pitch those professors out to the media. And now you don't get anywhere unless you can show that somebody's going to be good on camera, right? So you've got those little quick video segments are super important to do for social now. And we just had fun with it. And one of the great things was that nothing was wrong at the time, right? And there was no bad way to do it because nobody had been doing it at all. So we just got to have fun with it, and that made it easier and now it's, just in all sorts of different ways you can use those tools.
Everything's not always fun on a campus, though. I mean, sometimes bad things happen. And so whether it was a huge crisis or a medium crisis, what are the types of skills that you learned that you've been able to implement throughout your career in terms of when bad news is happening, this is the best way that we want to approach dealing with it from a communication standpoint?
Yeah, I was on campus from 2006 to 2012 in my first SDSU stint in media relations. We had a number of major crises during that time, including we had a student that was studying abroad that went missing and ended up, unfortunately passing away in an accident. And there was, sort of a search for him. And, you really had to lead with empathy in a lot of those situations because the student body was in that scenario wasn't close by because the person was abroad. And so there was this sense of separation and not knowing what was happening. So we really were trying to make sure that the campus was informed, make sure that, everybody had the information that they needed. How could we be helpful, even though we're all so far away? And just because the media was what's going on and wanted to know at every turn, but it wasn't like it was happening on campus. It wasn't our student, our university police that was dealing with it. So it was a very challenging environment. It was really a great learning lesson to make sure that we are in constant communication with the right people, that we're always leading with empathy and with care, knowing that there's so many people that, are impacted in different ways by something like that, and not being afraid to have the sort of the audacity to say, we don't know, we're waiting for that information. I think what I learned through that process and through several other things is never to speculate, never to say anything you weren't 100% sure of, because things change so quickly and information, gets muddled so quickly, and it's always be, certain, and it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that yet, but I'm going to get it for you.
What you just said is so important for journalists, but it becomes even more important for media relations and communications, because if you say the slightest thing wrong, now it blows up even more.
And there's no way to take it back anymore because everything's like so instantaneous.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us about the decision to leave San Diego State and learning different other elements of communication, how other industries, whether it's San Diego Gas and Electric, working for a council member in politics, how all of these different things kind of help shape your ability to just get better and better at your job and understand the role that you can play in communications.
For the most part, it had been a personal decision. I was at a time in my life, I had just had my first child, and I was, kind of itchy to go explore and see what other things were out there. Working for, SDG&E and for the council member, exposed me to different areas of our community in general, right? How all of these different entities kind of interface and work with SDSU. I've been at SDSU, except for the years that I was at NBC, which was like about 4.5 years. I came as a student and worked with, right? So like most of my time had been spent, and I had never really separated from the university in a true sense, because I was an alum and I would attend all the games, and I was a true alumni booster through and through. So it was really a good experience to be able to see how these other organizations did communications, for better, for worse, right? There's always like things that you come in, you're like, oh, I think we could do things better this way, or I think we could do things better this way. And that experience I had at SDSU was able to help me communicate with those different entities about ways we could improve our communications and really sort of step up on the leadership perspective, right? Being able to, it wasn't just doing the things that, needed to be done, but it was really trying to execute on strategy and identifying the best methods to achieve our goals. So I loved the opportunities in both of those locations. I met a ton of great people, and everyone invested in San Diego as a whole. At the city, it was a really eye-opening experience to be part of that part of a team that was both so focused on helping the constituents and the residents of San Diego, but then also so, sort of held back by the fact that politics is part of it, right? So it was an interesting dynamic and interesting balance, but it really prepared me for those experiences built together, prepared me for what I needed to do when I got back to SDSU, because all of a sudden SDSU was part of this big political conversation relative to the old stadium site. And if I hadn't had those experiences, I would not have been prepared for what I was going to have to do in the coming years.
So I'm going to get into that in a moment, but you mentioned something about how, you were just starting a family, and for everyone, it's a little bit different. And I know that whenever I talk to students, the main thing that I want to get across to them, especially if they want to work in sports, is I tell them, you're going to work nights, you're going to work weekends, you're going to work holidays, like all of those sporting events that you see on Thanksgiving and Christmas and 4th of July, right? So make sure that you are prepared for that. And I tell people that, maybe the top 1% of people who work in sports are making a whole lot of money, but you're really not doing it for the money for most of the people. And so at least for you, when it comes to like trying to find this work-life balance, which we're all striving to do, and it's really easy to say, it's really hard to do. You want to be the best that you can at the job. I'm just wondering, just like any practical lessons you can give to me, to those listening, to students, about what's the best way to make sure that you are doing your job the best you can, but also trying to find that work-life balance as you decide what jobs to take.
It's always a work in progress, right? So first of all, I will say that like I made a great choice in a partner, because he has my back. He helps out. Like, if I have a busy day, then, I know I have someone I can rely on that can step up. But communication at home is as important as it is at work. So like, making sure that like I'm communicating when my schedule is changing, when I'm, things are going in flames, for example, if it's like a major fire that's taking place, that, communication at home is something that is just as important, but it can be done. And there's so many examples of people that have been able to balance those things. But yeah, I would say first, communication, and second, setting boundaries, right? There are going to be people in your work life that are not going to respect the decision that you have made, right? To balance those two things. And so you just need to be upfront with your communication. We didn't have Zoom options back, and now like thinking back, like how did I get two children through like preschool and daycare and all that stuff without the option to just like not go in? It's wild to me. So we, having that option now is obviously great, but for journalists, you got to be on site, right? You've got to be at the place. You've got to see everything that's happening. So it's just about communicating your needs and making sure that folks respect your boundaries, and also making sure you're communicating with, whoever it is in your village to support you. Nothing's greater than, being able to sort of achieve your dreams on multiple levels.
All right, let's get into you returning to San Diego State. So I'm pretty sure that you returned October 2016, I believe is when you returned. So let's start by setting the stage. The Chargers are still in San Diego in 2016, although there's lots of discussion about what's going to happen with them. And so as much as you remember of October 2016, set the landscape in terms of what are the different players. Mission Valley Development is not yet a thing, but you're returning to campus, and this is why you're returning to campus, and these are the key things that need to be done at the time.
Honestly, at the time, Greg had called me and said, "Hey, there's this great opportunity. I would love for you to come back." And we, figured out how to make that happen. It was not part of like the interview. Like it wasn't like this is coming and you need to be prepared for this. I mean, it was all kind of quiet. I was coming back in as a director to Greg being the chief communications officer. I knew what needed to be done, right? And it was really media relations. I was going to also help oversee community relations. We had to, we had some people in some roles, and then we ended up having to hire new people into certain roles. And so there was a lot of work to be done to make the organization really functional, but things quickly, at the end of a school year, October was, we were getting towards the end of, it was mid-fall semester. And then, you hit the holidays and everything. So once we got back from the holidays was really when everything started to shift. In fact, Greg got a new position and left at that time. And I was not prepared at all for that. That happened. And I stepped into an interim role as a result. Then the president announced that he was taking a new position. So that all of a sudden there was all of this turmoil and all of the undercurrent of, this conversation about what's going to happen with the new stadium. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say that I was like overtly prepared for everything that was to come, but I was happy that I had the experiences that I had coming into it, because I wouldn't have been able to execute on the things that needed to be done if I hadn't already been part of those communities.
Yeah, I don't want this to, maybe this is too dramatic or something, but it's what we do in journalism, to make things dramatic. I think there's certain times in your life when you may not be 100% prepared for something, but then you just realize, I have to step up. It's my time. Like you start looking around and you're like, I have to do this. And then especially a sense of my university needs me. And now I have this opportunity as people are leaving to really be the person that steadies the ship and keeps us going in the direction that we're going to do. And so I'm wondering if you almost like felt like this, maybe burden's not the right word, but it's just this opportunity that this is my time to shine and really help out my university when it needs to be helped.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was excited to be able to sort of step into that leadership role and help to keep things stable during a time of great confusion, right? Always a presidential transition is going to be challenging. But in the context of when it happened, it was definitely, an even more challenging time. So yes, I was really honored, obviously, as an alum and caring so deeply about this place, to be able to be in a position to, basically be part of the decision-making, right? Be at the table. And I think especially for public relations folks, having a seat at the table, whether you're actually making the decisions or not as it relates to certain things, your perspective is super valuable, because you can tell folks like, okay, this is not going to play well with the public. These are the questions we're going to get from media. We need to be prepared to answer them. And that was one of the things that I made sure that I was really paying attention to. And that has actually helped me throughout this entire process as I sort of shifted from being, part of the communications team and in the president's office, and now, sort of overseeing all of the site development. It has been, okay, what have we said? What have we committed to? What are our goals and, promises, and making sure that we're sticking to them. That has been something that has been really important to me personally, is to make sure that we're continuing to deliver on what the public, has expectations of. But that is, in a PR and communications perspective, being able to talk to leadership and remind them of those things in times of decision making is actually really important and really valuable.
So once the Chargers officially said we're leaving San Diego, their final seasons, now there's a huge decision for the city, the county, everyone. What are we going to do with Mission Valley? Especially with your previous role in politics, what stories can you share with us about, there was a lot of different ideas about what to do with Mission Valley. There was multiple ballot measures that were involved. What are some of your just biggest takeaways about the things that needed to be done to ultimately have the voters say yes to San Diego State developing Mission Valley?
Yeah, it was really interesting from a university representative. We weren't able to advocate for the actual initiative. Like, we're not allowed to sort of weigh in on ballot measures. So all we could do was communicate what we would do if we had this opportunity, right? How would we develop the site? How would it improve economic and educational, opportunity in our region? How would our ability to be the ones to sort of spearhead and steward this land benefit San Diego? So that was, kind of our role. That was the role. I must have given 100 plus presentations. The university, not just me, but other folks, across the university, to share that with the community, to make sure everyone was aware and knew what that was, be able to go meet with elected officials and meet with folks in the community to make sure they understood, and planning groups and et cetera, make sure they understood what those opportunities were, should we be able to do this. But probably the hardest thing during that time was the political, because it was so political, hearing negative things said about the university that were either not true or just part of the campaign, which is normal in the spirit of political campaigns. But for caring so much about a place, to hear things said about it was very challenging to not want to lash out and defend. And so there was a lot of self-restraint that was learned throughout that process as well, which is huge, right? Being able to not let yourself get emotional about something and just, stay the course, stick to the message, and make sure that everybody is seeing sort of the positive of the situation.
Once it gets decided that San Diego State is going to develop Mission Valley, I know I've always been curious of this. Take us through, who are the people who decide there's going to be X number of hotels or X number of rooms, or we're going to have X number of buildings for research, or we're going to have this many acres for this. All of these plans that are super interesting and it looks great. How do you specifically get into the details of the where and the how many and the why? Because I'm sure everyone's saying, I want to be a part of it. I want to do this. Can we get this? Can we get this? But everybody can't get everything.
So the university undertook a master planning exercise. So we hired an local architect to help us develop a master plan. At the same time, we were evaluating sort of financials and how would we be able to make this happen? And so those two things need to sort of go side by side with each other. And so the master plan was informed by a lot of the community input that we went out and saw it during that time. The city was going through a community planning exercise for Mission Valley. So we were pulling on that because that was another source of community input as to what they wanted to see the site developed as. And we utilized both of those inputs, both the financial feasibility piece of it and the master planning exercise to sort of determine what the outcome of the site planning would be. So we have 4,600 residential units that are planned for the site. We have 1.6 million square feet of that research and development space that we call the Innovation District. We have a hotel with up to 400 keys. We have the park and open space in part that was directed by the community plan that had called for that river park space, but also by the initiative. The initiative folks that wrote that initiative had a lot of very specific requirements that we needed to, if we were going to develop the site, we were going to get that opportunity, we were going to have to meet those requirements too. So we needed to take that into consideration. So there was a lot of different inputs and it resulted in what you see evolving today. But the open space was a big piece of the pie, of the part of the plan, because we really started with open space first. We recognized, our architect with Carrier Johnson is the firm that did that. And they recognized that sites had historic flooding. It's talked about a lot. It's been talked about a lot. In fact, we all remember one, I think it was a Poinsettia Bowl that got flooded out. And there were heroic efforts had to be made to pump the field in order for the game to be played. So we knew we had to deal with that. we knew we had to build this open space requirement. And so our architects came up with a brilliant plan to utilize the open space around the edges of the site. They could double as flood mitigation, right? Because it would be able to sort of take that water on and filter it naturally down, into the ground and not impact anything in the development areas. And then we had to make sure that the development site was, at an elevation that wouldn't get impacted by flooding. There were so many smart people that were, a part of that decision-making and plan. But ultimately, the president of the university, and before the initial site planning was done under our interim president, Sally Roush, who sort of took on this great opportunity. And then, of course, President Delatorre now, who has helped spearhead it since 2018. So
how did COVID impact things? Because if I remember correctly, it kind of sped up tearing down the old stadium, right? Explain how COVID impacted the development and how that changed the timeline.
Yeah. So because of COVID, we ended up finishing out negotiations with the city of San Diego over Zoom, which, is a story for a whole other day. Seeing me in my pajamas on Zoom with the city while having like a Zoom kindergartner behind you, like that was a lot. We ended up getting CSU board approval was in January. And in March, at the very first ever virtual CSU board trustees meeting is where they approved the financing and the design for the new stadium. It was tense, right? It was a lot of tense. And then we started construction under COVID. I mean, those construction workers that started, in COVID had to wear masks outside. Like it was, very early on with all the protocol, and, it was hot during the summer. They were wearing their masks throughout, the construction. I mean, it evolved every few weeks, are we doing the right thing? It definitely made things challenging, but it also made them more rewarding in the end. We were able to overcome a lot of those issues and a lot of those challenges to really achieve what we wanted.
When you start to see Mission Valley develop the way that it is, I don't know if it's a pinch me moments or what are the different just like things when something is completed and you go, wow, this used to just be all parking lot. And now there's all of these new things that are here.
Just seeing people experience that new stadium on the first day was so rewarding. See them come in and just sort of ooh and ah at all of the beautiful things and all the details that the team really worked on to make sure that it reflected both San Diego and San Diego State. It was that just seeing other people experience it, because, once you're sort of part of the day to day, you're seeing little things grow over time. And at the end, you're like, it's great. But seeing other people have that experience was super rewarding. And now today, seeing folks, bring their families out and play on the playground at the park, a dream, like a park that has literally been in the city's plans for decades, right, is now reality. And the fact the university got to have a hand in making that happen is really rewarding. And that I personally got to have a hand in making that happen is a great, rewarding experience. Yeah.
Okay. So I know that we just scratched the surface on a lot of different things, but I want to kind of give you the open floor for anything that I forgot that you just think is important. Maybe it's a lesson for students who want to major in journalism and communications, or whether it's about the Mission Valley project. I just feel like there's probably numerous things that I left out and just important things that you want to get across about your experiences as a student coming back to the school and what you're ultimately doing these days.
Well, first of all, honestly, journalism today is so different from when I was in school. It's almost even more relevant for just no matter what job you have, because communicating is so critical, and being able to, write well and communicate proficiently is going to be, a skill that you will be able to carry over to all sorts of different disciplines. So, journalism, there's that path, which is a fantastic path to follow, but it will also prepare you for all sorts of different positions. So I didn't expect to be in this type of a role at all, but I pull on my journalism and communication skills every single day, for every email that I write, for every package of work that I do to help attract developers to the site, to help tell the story of SDSU Mission Valley, to make sure others want to help invest in it. Those skills carried over really well. So don't ever, put yourself in a niche and kind of follow I think following the path that I followed was unexpected, but rewarding. So just know that your skills that you're getting right now are going to be beneficial no matter where you end up.
The thing that I'm going to add, and I know this makes me sound like a journalism snob, but whenever someone tells a story and they cannot get to the point fast enough, or they veer off, or they just, or their details are terrible. Like I can tell you're not a journalism major, man. Like, learn how to tell a story, folks. That even if you don't become a journalist, learn how to edit yourself. Learn how to know what details are important, what side notes are totally irrelevant. Get to the point, people.
No, that's so true. And it's true in business and in meetings as much as it is in journalism and in writing. The long form, it's not, long form story is not as attractive these days anyways, but you really have to get to it and make sure your point's very clear and concise and to the point. And I think in business, people respect you for that straightforwardness too.
All right, Gina, this has been outstanding. We like to close out by bragging about other San Diego State alums. You can pick one, you can pick multiple. I'm sure that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of candidates for you with all of your time around San Diego State. So anyone that you want to shout out, brag about some other people that are making us proud from our school.
Okay, so if we're talking about JMS alums, Phyllis Schwartz was my mentor in college. She was the president of NBC, and she went on to do a number of leadership roles in broadcast TV, and then retired from that. And now she's a children's author, and she's writing children's books about things that she cares about, from surviving cancer to anti-bullying, and just, it's inspiring to see someone that, committed their career to, what they studied, and then to be able to shift like that and do something just as impactful is really rewarding. When I wrote for Daily Aztec and did KCR as a student too, and Angie Robert is, an SDSU powerhouse. She works at Intuit and does amazing communications and work with women in that organization, doing some great leadership things. So she's a great person to get to know. She also was on the alumni board, a huge SDSU Aztec basketball fan. And so she's somebody that I definitely look up to. Those are just a couple that off the top of my head, I have like a million people that I'm going to send you later that I think you should check out that are doing great things.
Absolutely. Make sure that you get me the contact information for both of them so we can have them on a future edition of this podcast as well. The only thing that I would add when it comes to alums is it's not just those who are sticking in journalism. Even right now, before we recorded this podcast, I'm talking to my friends from the Daily Aztec about what event we're going to go to next and where we're going to meet up. And it's just the lifelong friends that we made, not just on campus, on the dorms, everywhere, at the Daily Aztec, at KCR, and just how valuable those friendships are. And that's the other thing that I tell students is I say, look around, because the people who are in the class next to you, the people who are riding next to you at that terminal, you're probably going to be friends with them the rest of their life. You're going to be at each other's weddings, or at least I hope so. And so all of that, just, pick your friends wisely in college, because those are the people you're going to lean on a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. The most of my friends today are people that I met at SDSU, and, that experience on campus has persevered through lots of life changes. So I think you should always get involved with the things that interest you on campus, and even expose yourself to things that you may not be interested in or don't know if you're interested in, like explore, right? Because that's what college is all about. And do things that might seem scary when you're here, like studying abroad, right? I never got to do that. I wish I could go back and study abroad. I think that would have been a great experience. So doing things like that maybe you're not sure of will be amazing experiences.
All right, Gina, thank you so much for your time, all the stories and all the updates about Mission Valley. Really enjoyed having you on the podcast this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Josh.
Once again, my name is Josh Sushan. I'm your host for the Where You At podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you're at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms in person or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.